Get that filthy box off my plane, boy. We don't drag strays into first class.
Ma'am, that's my battle buddy's burial flag. He died saving my life in Kuwait 1991.
Your buddy? The only thing your kind saved was a welfare check.
Step back from this case, ma'am. Step back, boy.
I've worked this cabin 31 years. That splintered piece of trash ain't flying up front. That splintered piece of trash ain't flying up front.
Oh. 48 passengers froze. Nobody moved. Except one man, 2 rows back, gray flannel jacket. What Margaret didn't know was that he'd been waiting 35 years to repay the soldier she just spat on. And that one slammed lid was about to cost her everything. Her job, her pension, her name, her freedom. The alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. in a small white house outside Macon, Georgia. Victor Carter sat up slow. His right knee popped. The shrapnel scar across his thigh, a souvenir from a burning Bradley fighting vehicle in southern Kuwait, always woke up before he did. He turned on the lamp. The room smelled like cedar from the chest at the foot of his bed, and faintly like the lavender soap his late wife used to buy in bulk from the Macon farmers market. Eleanor had been gone 6 years. He still bought the same soap. On the dresser sat one framed photograph. 2 young soldiers in desert camouflage, M16 rifles slung across their chests. Behind them, the Kuwaiti sky burned black with oil well smoke, the air so thick with soot you could write your name in it on the hood of a Humvee. The taller soldier on the left was Captain Victor Carter, 33 years old, January 1991. The smaller soldier on the right was Private First Class Elijah Brown, 19 years old, Brooklyn, loud laugh, bad jokes. Carried a Bible his mother had given him in the chest pocket of his uniform. 46 days after that photo was taken, Elijah threw himself on top of a rocket-propelled grenade meant for Victor. The Bible never came home. Just the flag. Victor washed his face in the small bathroom. He laced a pair of polished black dress shoes. Old, but the leather still held a shine. He buttoned a plain navy suit. On the left lapel, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, he pinned a small pale blue ribbon with 5 tiny white stars. The Medal of Honor. Awarded by President George H.W. Bush in October 1991. He'd worn it in public exactly 4 times in 35 years. Today would be the 5th. From the mantel, he lifted the wooden flag case. Triangular, hand-carved. The wood was walnut, oiled smooth by decades of his hands. Inside, behind glass, was the cotton burial flag that had been folded over Elijah Brown's coffin at Cypress Hills Cemetery in Brooklyn on March 14, 1991. Elijah's mother, Mrs. Doris Brown, had carried that flag for 32 years. Last winter, she was dying of pancreatic cancer. She'd pressed the case into Victor's hands and said, "Take him to Arlington one time. He'd have wanted to see it." That's where Victor was going today. By 7:42 a.m., Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International was already roaring. Announcements echoed off polished marble. Somewhere down Concourse B, a Cinnabon was just opening. The buttery cinnamon smell wrapped around every traveler within 50 yards. A baby was crying. A wheeled suitcase clattered over a metal seam in the floor. Victor moved slow through the terminal. He carried 2 things. A small leather duffel slung over his shoulder. The flag case gripped in both hands across his chest, the way you'd carry a sleeping child. The veterans nonprofit had gifted him a first-class ticket, the first one of his life. Atlantic Crown Airways, Flight 2186, ATL to Washington Reagan, scheduled departure 9:05 a.m. At the gate, the agent, a young white woman, took his boarding pass, studied it, studied his face, studied it again. She asked for his ID. He handed it over. She typed something into the computer for longer than seemed necessary. A white businessman behind Victor sighed loudly. "Some of us have meetings, sweetheart." The agent finally waved Victor through. She did not say thank you. In the jet bridge, a man in a tailored suit glanced at the wooden case and muttered, just loud enough, "Carry-on rules are carry-on rules." Victor said nothing. He'd heard worse in airports. He'd heard worse in restaurants. He'd heard worse in his own neighborhood for 68 years. He stepped through the aircraft door. The first-class cabin smelled like new leather and weak coffee. 8 seats, cream carpet, soft amber lighting that made everyone look slightly sunburned. The flight attendant standing at the galley was in her mid-50s. Blonde hair pulled into a tight French twist. Lipstick the exact shade of red of a stop sign. Her name tag said, Margaret A., 31 years. She glanced at the executive in 1A, smiled. Mr. Hendricks, welcome aboard, sir. Champagne for you this morning? Then she turned and saw Victor. The smile didn't drop, it just stopped reaching her eyes. 2 rows back in seat 4C, a man in a gray flannel jacket lowered his Wall Street Journal by exactly 2 inches. He didn't say a word, but he saw everything. Victor walked the 8 feet from the cabin door to seat 2A. The cream carpet hushed his steps. The cabin smelled like fresh brewed coffee and someone's expensive cologne. Sandalwood, maybe. Margaret Anderson did not move out of his way. He turned sideways to slip past her. The wooden flag case brushed the edge of her hip, barely a graze. She pulled back sharply like he'd touched her with a dirty hand. Sir, her voice cut clean across the cabin. Sir, are you sure you're in the right cabin? Victor stopped. He turned. Yes, ma'am, seat 2A. May I see your boarding pass? He'd already shown it to the gate agent. He'd already shown it to the agent at the jet bridge. He pulled it out a 3rd time and handed it to her without a word. She held it up to the amber overhead light. She rotated it. She squinted at the barcode. The white executive in 1A, Mr. Hendricks, was sipping champagne and watching over the rim of his glass like a man at a tennis match. Margaret said. She handed it back. Sometimes the gate makes mistakes with these complimentary upgrades. We'll just have to see if the system clears you. It already cleared me, ma'am. The agent scanned it. Sir, please take your seat. We'll figure it out. Victor sat down in 2A. He placed the flag case across his lap. Both hands rested on the wood, knuckle to knuckle, the way you'd hold a steering wheel through a storm. A second flight attendant, younger, brunette, name tag said Claire, moved down the aisle with a silver tray of hot-rolled towels. Lavender steam curled off them. She offered one to 1A. Mr. Hendricks took it with 2 fingers. She offered one to 1B. A woman in a Chanel jacket smiled. She turned to offer one to 1C. Margaret stepped in front of her. Claire, honey, I've got 2A. You go ahead and start the cabin announcements. Claire blinked. Oh, okay, sure. She handed the tongs to Margaret and walked toward the galley. Margaret turned with the tray. She offered a towel to 1C, to 1D. She skipped 2A entirely, walked right past Victor like he wasn't there, offered the next towel to a passenger in 3A. 2 rows back, the man in the gray flannel jacket, General Edward Moore, lowered his newspaper another inch. His eyes moved from the tray, to Margaret, to Victor, to the back of Margaret's head. He did not speak, not yet. Victor raised one finger, calm, polite, the way you'd flag a waitress at a busy diner. Ma'am, when you have a moment. Margaret turned. The smile she gave him was the same shape as a smile, but contained none of the warmth. Yes, sir? I believe you missed me with the towels. Oh, she glanced down at her empty tray. Looks like we're out, sir. I'm so sorry. A passenger in 3B coughed. He had clearly watched her skip 2A. There are 3 more on the tray, ma'am. Margaret looked down. There were, in fact, 3 more rolled towels visible. She did not pick one up. Those are for the back of the cabin, sir. The back of the cabin doesn't get towels on this airline, ma'am. Only first class does. Her jaw tightened. The amber light caught it. Sir, her voice dropped half a register, hardened. Are you arguing with me? No, ma'am, I'm asking for a towel. And I told you we're out. She walked away. In 4C, General Moore folded his paper in half, then in quarters. He set it on the empty seat beside him. He still had not spoken. The cabin door closed with a hydraulic hiss. The pilot's voice crackled overhead. Flight attendants, doors to arrival cross-check. Margaret returned. This time she stopped at row 2 and stared down at the wooden case in Victor's lap. Sir, that's going to need to be stowed. Victor looked up. Ma'am, this is a U.S. flag case. Department of Defense protocol. A folded burial flag never travels in the cargo hold. It stays with the escort. I don't know what protocol you're talking about, sir. On my aircraft, a large wooden object does not sit in a passenger's lap during taxi and takeoff. Period. It's not a large wooden object, ma'am. It's a triangular flag case, 14 inches on the base. Fits in the overhead, but I'd prefer to keep it with me. You don't get to prefer on my aircraft, sir. Mr. Hendricks in 1A snorted into his champagne. Margaret's voice rose just enough for the whole cabin to hear her. Sir, I'm going to need you to comply with crew member instructions. You know that's a federal offense if you don't. Victor's hands tightened on the wood. The Medal of Honor pin on his lapel caught a sliver of the amber light. Margaret didn't notice. She wasn't looking at his lapel. She was looking through him. Ma'am. His voice was very soft now. I would like to speak to the captain. The captain is busy flying the airplane, sir. We haven't pushed back yet, ma'am. She inhaled through her teeth. In 3B, a young woman named Sarah Williams had just turned 27 last month. She worked at a marketing firm in Atlanta. She was flying to D.C. for her sister's bridal shower. She had been watching this whole exchange. She slid her phone out of the seat pocket, tilted it onto her thigh, tapped record, held it just above the edge of the armrest. She did not aim it. She did not need to. The lens caught everything between row 1 and row 3. She'd later tell a Senate subcommittee that she didn't even decide to record. Her hand just did it on its own. Margaret reached for the flag case. Her fingers closed around the polished edge of the walnut. She tugged. Victor's hands did not move. Not a millimeter. It was like she'd tried to lift a parked truck by the bumper. She tugged again, harder. Sir, let go of the case. Ma'am, please step back. Sir, let go of the case. Ma'am, he just touched me. Margaret jerked her hand back, cradled it like she'd been scalded. She turned to the cabin, eyes wide. Did everyone just see that? He grabbed my wrist. Mr. Hendricks in 1A set down his champagne. I saw it. He grabbed her, clear as day. Victor's left hand was still on the case. His right hand was still on the case. Neither hand had moved 1 inch in the last 60 seconds. Sarah Williams's camera had it all. In 3B, Sarah whispered very quietly into the microphone of her phone. She's lying. She's lying. She's literally lying. In 4C, General Moore's nostrils flared once. He still did not stand. He was waiting, the way a man who had commanded 10,000 soldiers in a desert war waits. He was watching how Victor handled himself under fire. He was watching the man he had once known as Captain Carter in 1991. He was watching in real time the same calm he had seen in a burning Bradley 35 years ago. Margaret stalked to the front of the cabin. She lifted the interphone handset. She dialed 2 digits. Her voice came through her own clip-on microphone, half broadcast to the cabin by accident. Captain, this is Anderson. I have a non-compliant passenger in 2A. He refused crew instructions. He grabbed me, and he's refusing to stow a large wooden object during taxi. I'm requesting we return to the gate and have him removed. Pause. The captain's voice came back, calm. Anderson, you said he grabbed you? Yes, Captain. Stand by. She hung up the phone. She turned to the cabin and addressed all 48 passengers like she was a kindergarten teacher and they were the children. Folks, I am so sorry for this delay. We just need everyone to follow basic safety rules so we can get you on your way. Several passengers in coach craned their necks to see what was happening up front. Mr. Hendricks in 1A turned around in his seat. He looked at Victor. He smiled, a small, cold smile that did not show teeth. Just give her the box, buddy, he said. You're holding up the whole plane. Victor turned his head slowly, looked at Mr. Hendricks, said nothing. Mr. Hendricks's smile faded. He turned back around. Victor lowered his eyes to the flag case in his lap. He ran his thumb along the polished walnut edge. Once, slow, the way Mrs. Brown used to run her thumb along the edge of her son's photograph on her nightstand. He spoke, not loud, but the cabin had gone quiet enough to hear him. Ma'am, this case contains the burial flag of Private First Class Elijah Brown, United States Army, killed in action February 26, 1991, in southern Kuwait. He died saving my life. With respect, ma'am, this flag is not going under any seat. It is not going in any bin. It stays with me, or I deplane, and this airline can answer to the United States Department of Defense for why. The cabin went silent. Margaret's face hardened into stone. The flight attendant, Claire, standing in the galley, brought a hand to her mouth. In 4C, General Moore closed his eyes. Just for one long second. Like a man choosing the right moment. He was almost done waiting. The interphone chimed. The captain's voice came through even and measured. "Anderson, cabin, now!" Margaret hung up. She did not move toward the cockpit. Instead, she turned back to Victor. "Sir, before the captain comes out, I need to inspect that case." Victor looked up. "Inspect it for what, ma'am?" "Anything you bring on my aircraft, I have the right to inspect for safety." "Ma'am, that's not true. Crew can require items be stowed. You don't have the authority to open a passenger's personal belongings." "Are you a lawyer now, sir?" "No, ma'am. I'm a retired Army officer. I know the regulations." Her mouth twitched. The word officer landed somewhere behind her eyes, but she swallowed it down. She refused to let it register. "Sir, open the case." "No, ma'am." "Open the case." "No." She reached for it. This time her hand moved fast. She got both palms on the walnut and yanked. Victor's grip held. His shoulders barely moved, but his jaw locked tight enough that the cords in his neck stood up. The flag case did not budge. A small, dry sound escaped her throat. A grunt of effort, of frustration, of something close to panic. She pulled harder. Her shellac-red nail caught the edge of the case and snapped off clean, ticking down onto the cream carpet. She gasped. Loud. Theatrical. Eyes wide. She staggered back one step, cradling her hand like she'd just been hit by a car. "He attacked me! Oh my God, he attacked me! Did you all see that?" Victor's hands had not moved. In 1A, Mr. Hendricks nodded vigorously. "I saw it. He went right for her." In 3B, Sarah Williams's phone was steady on her thigh. She did not breathe. She just kept recording. Her own knuckles had gone white around the edge of her armrest. In 4C, General Moore's left hand closed slowly into a fist. He uncurled it, then closed it again. He was waiting on the captain. He was waiting on Margaret to keep going. He needed her to keep going. Margaret pressed every button she had been trained to press in 31 years of weaponizing airline policy. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice." He had not raised it. "Sir, you are making the other passengers uncomfortable." He had not moved. "Sir, I do not feel safe with you on this aircraft." There it was, the sentence, the 5 words every black man in America knows by heart. I do not feel safe. The sentence that can end careers, end lives. The sentence that, statistically, gets a black man tackled, cuffed, dragged off airplanes, shot in stairwells. Victor's jaw worked once, just once. He looked at her, calm. He said, "I understand, ma'am." He did not say anything else. In 4C, General Moore opened his mouth. For the first time in the entire flight, he was about to speak. Then he stopped. He shut his mouth again. Because Victor, the Victor he remembered from a burning desert in 1991, had taught him a single rule on the morning they pulled 3 soldiers out of a tank that was already on fire. Don't move until you know the move ends it. Moore was waiting for the move that ended it. Victor was waiting for the same thing. Margaret tried a new tactic. She pivoted to the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry. I'm going to need to ask everyone in row 1 and 3 if they witnessed this passenger physically assault me." A woman in 3D, early 60s, white, pearl earrings, said very quietly, "Ma'am, I was watching. He didn't touch you." Margaret's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me?" "He didn't touch you. You touched the case. He just held on to it." "Ma'am, with respect, I think you were not paying attention." "I was paying very close attention. I'm a retired federal judge. I pay attention to everything." The woman's name was Eleanor Brennan. She had served 22 years on the bench of the Northern District of Georgia. Margaret's face went the color of her lipstick. In 4C, the corner of General Moore's mouth lifted, just once, and then settled. Margaret abandoned row 3. She walked to the front of the cabin. She turned. She faced Victor across 8 feet of cream carpet. "Sir." Her voice was tight now, trembling at the edges, but tight. "I am giving you one final opportunity to comply. Hand over the case, or I will be forced to remove it for safety reasons." Ma'am, do not do what I think you are about to do. She stepped toward him. Ma'am, step back from this case. She bent at the waist. She got both hands on the walnut. Victor's voice dropped to a register so low it almost wasn't a voice anymore. It was the voice of a captain in a Bradley fighting vehicle in February of 1991, telling a 19-year-old private to keep his head down. Ma'am, do not. She wrenched. This time, Victor let it go. He let it go because he had calculated something in the space of 1/2 second. If he held on, she would scream, "Assault!" again. If he let her take it, she would stand exposed in front of 48 witnesses doing something that could not be excused, could not be reframed, could not be lawyered away. He let her have the case. She stumbled back one step with the sudden absence of resistance. She caught her balance. She straightened up. She looked at the wooden case in her hands like a trophy. She turned toward the galley. She walked the 8 feet to the forward bulkhead. She pulled the galley curtain. She did not pull it all the way. In 4C, General Moore had a perfect line of sight. In 3B, Sarah Williams's phone tilted forward slightly. She had a line of sight, too. She would later tell investigators she remembered every detail of the next 11 seconds with the clarity of a woman who had just witnessed a murder. Margaret walked to the trash compactor. She lifted the lid. She held the wooden flag case in both hands for 1 full second, long enough that Sarah would later say it looked like she was posing. She dropped it in. The case landed on used coffee cups, balled paper napkins, an empty creamer carton, a half-eaten croissant, the folded American flag inside, the flag that had been folded by a 19-year-old honor guard at Cypress Hills Cemetery in March of 1991, the flag that had been pressed into Doris Brown's hands as a young soldier said, "On behalf of a grateful nation," landed face up in coffee grounds. Margaret slammed the lid. She turned around. She straightened her uniform jacket. She fixed her hair. She walked back into the main cabin. She smiled. A tight, performative smile, like she had just finished organizing a messy drawer. "Problem solved," she announced. "Sir, please take your seat, or we are going to have a much bigger problem on our hands." The cabin was silent. A woman in 5B made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a sob. Mr. Hendricks in 1A looked at his champagne glass like he wasn't sure how it had gotten there. Victor was very, very still. His left hand lifted slowly. It moved to his lapel. His fingertips touched the small, pale blue ribbon with 5 tiny white stars. He let his hand drop back into his lap. He closed his eyes. His lips moved, soundless. He said one word, twice. Elijah. Elijah. In 4C, General Moore saw the hand move to the lapel. He saw what the hand touched. He saw the lips move. He read the name. And something cracked inside him. Not loudly, not visibly, just a small internal shift. The shift of a 4-star general realizing in real time that the woman in the galley had just thrown the burial flag of Elijah Brown into a trash compactor on a Tuesday morning over breakfast service. His hand moved to the inside pocket of his gray flannel jacket. He felt the leather wallet. He felt the badge inside. He did not pull it out yet. He was still waiting. He was waiting for the captain. The interphone in the galley buzzed. Margaret picked it up. "Anderson." The captain's voice was no longer calm. "Anderson, I told you to come up to the flight deck 5 minutes ago." "Captain, I had to handle the passenger. You had to follow a direct order from your captain. I'm coming out. Stay where you are." The line clicked dead. Margaret hung up. For the first time since Victor had stepped onto her airplane, a thin line appeared between her eyebrows, the first crack of doubt. She turned toward the cabin to deliver one more reassuring smile to her passengers. She didn't get to, because in row 4, the quiet man in the gray flannel jacket folded his newspaper one last time, set it on the seat beside him, took off his reading glasses, and stood up. He stood up slowly. 62 years old, 6 feet even. Silver hair cropped close to the skull, the way a man cuts his hair when he spent 40 years putting on a uniform every morning. His gray flannel jacket was unremarkable. His jeans were unremarkable. His leather shoes were unremarkable. The only thing remarkable about him was his posture. It was the posture of a man who had stood at attention before 3 presidents. He stepped into the aisle. The cream carpet hushed his shoes. Every head in first class turned toward the sound of nothing. His voice came out calm, carrying. The voice of a man who had given orders to 10,000 soldiers across a desert in 1991 and did not need a microphone to do it. "Ma'am, I need you to retrieve that case from the trash compactor. Right now." Margaret turned. The performative smile was still half glued to her face. It cracked when she saw him standing. "Sir, please return to your seat. This does not concern you." The man in the gray flannel jacket took one step forward. "Ma'am, it concerns me more than you know." "Sir, I am asking you nicely. Return to your seat or I will have to consider you a second non-compliant passenger." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not pull out a phone. He did not pull out a boarding pass. He did not pull out a badge. He pulled out a small, well-worn brown leather wallet, flipped it open with one hand, held it up at eye level. The amber cabin light caught the small embossed seal in the leather. It caught the laminated ID card. It caught the 4 small silver stars stitched onto the credential beneath the photo. He spoke clearly. "General Edward Moore, United States Army, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, reporting from leave." The cabin went so quiet you could hear the hydraulics ticking under the floor. Margaret's mouth opened. No sound came out. General Moore did not lower the wallet. "The man you have spent the last 20 minutes humiliating is Colonel Victor Carter, United States Army, retired. Medal of Honor recipient, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with Valor. The man who saved my life in Kuwait on February 28, 1991, when I was a 22-year-old second lieutenant trapped in a burning Bradley fighting vehicle." He let that sentence sit in the air. "The flag you just dropped in your trash compactor, ma'am, was folded over the body of Private First Class Elijah Brown, 19 years old, Brooklyn. He threw himself onto a rocket-propelled grenade 2 days before I was pulled out of that tank. He died saving Colonel Carter so that 2 days later, Colonel Carter could save me." In 3D, Judge Eleanor Brennan slowly removed her hand from her mouth. In 3B, Sarah Williams's phone was still recording. Her cheeks were wet. She had not realized she'd been crying. Mr. Hendricks in 1A set down his champagne very, very quietly, like he was trying not to make noise in a hospital room. Margaret's face was bloodless. I had there's no way I could have." "That's the problem, ma'am." General Moore lowered the wallet. He closed it. He slid it back into his jacket pocket. "You shouldn't have needed to know who he was. He told you what was in that case. He told you who was buried under that flag. He told you the year. He told you the country. And you laughed." "Sir, I was following—" "Following what, ma'am? Which protocol manual tells a flight attendant to put a folded burial flag into a trash compactor?" She had no answer. She had nothing. The galley curtain behind her shifted. Captain Daniel Brooks stepped out of the cockpit corridor. He was 44, Navy reservist, 6 years flying for Atlantic Crown. He saw General Moore standing in the aisle. He saw the ribbon on Victor's lapel, the small, pale blue one with the 5 tiny white stars he had only ever seen once before, on a retired admiral he'd flown back from a memorial service in 2019. Captain Brooks did the math. The color drained from his face exactly the way it had drained from Margaret's, but for the opposite reason. He walked down the aisle. He did not look at Margaret. He did not look at General Moore. He stopped at row 2. He knelt. He actually knelt, one knee on the cream carpet beside seat 2A, so that his eyes were level with Victor's. "Colonel Carter, sir. My name is Captain Daniel Brooks. On behalf of myself, my crew, and Atlantic Crown Airways, I am profoundly, profoundly sorry. I need to ask you, sir, what would you like me to do right now?" Victor turned his head. He looked at the captain for a long second. Then he turned his head toward Margaret. His voice came out quieter than it had been all morning. Quieter than the cabin air system. Quieter than the heartbeat of every passenger in that cabin. He said 3 words. "Get it back." Margaret stood frozen in front of the galley curtain. Captain Brooks stood up. He did not raise his voice. "Anderson, galley, now!" She did not move. "Anderson, did you hear me?" Her legs unlocked. She turned and walked to the trash compactor like a woman walking to her own sentencing. She lifted the lid. She reached in. She lifted out the wooden flag case. There was coffee staining one corner of the walnut. There was a smear of pastry cream along the side. A used napkin was stuck to the bottom. She turned and held it out to Victor with both hands. Her hands were shaking. Her shellac-red lipstick was smudged at one corner. Victor did not take it. He looked at her. Calm. Devastating. Set it on the seat beside me. Step back. She set it on the seat. She stepped back. In the galley behind her, Claire, the younger flight attendant, quietly pressed her hand to her mouth and turned her face to the wall. General Moore sat down in the empty seat across the aisle from Victor. He did not say anything. He just sat with him, the way he had once sat with him in a desert in 1991 after the smoke cleared. Captain Brooks turned to face Margaret across the 8 feet of cream carpet that suddenly felt like a courtroom. Anderson, you are relieved of duty effective this moment. You will not serve another passenger on this aircraft. You will gather your personal items. You will exit through the forward galley. Atlantic Crown Ground Operations is meeting you on the jet bridge. Captain, I was just following safety protocol. He was being aggressive. Anderson. His voice did not rise. It got quieter, the way a knife gets quieter as it sharpens. You will get the chance to explain everything you just did. To the FAA, to the Department of Defense, to Atlantic Crown Corporate, and I guarantee you, to every newsroom in this country before sundown. Her face crumpled. Captain, please. I've worked here 31 years. My pension. A second flight attendant stepped out of the rear galley. Her name tag said Diana, 9 years. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been listening through the curtain the entire time. She walked up to Margaret. She put a hand on her shoulder, not gently. Margaret, stop talking. Margaret looked at her. Looked at Diana like a woman recognizing for the first time in her life that the people she worked beside every day had been carrying something they had never told her. She did not say another word. She walked to the forward galley. She picked up a small black tote. She walked back through first class. She did not look at Victor. She did not look at General Moore. She did not look at Mr. Hendricks. She did not look at Judge Brennan. She walked down the jet bridge. The cabin door hissed shut behind her. For a long moment, nobody in the cabin spoke. Then Captain Brooks turned to face all 48 passengers. He pressed the PA button on the bulkhead. His voice came through every speaker in every cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Brooks speaking. I want to apologize to all of you for what just happened on this aircraft. It should not have happened. It will be investigated. And I want to tell you something else because you all deserve to know it. He paused. His own voice caught for half a second. He cleared his throat. We are honored today to have aboard this aircraft Colonel Victor Carter, United States Army, retired. Colonel Carter is a recipient of the Medal of Honor, of the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Purple Hearts. He is flying to Washington today to lay the burial flag of his battle buddy, Private First Class Elijah Brown, at Arlington National Cemetery. If you are able to stand, I would like to ask you to please stand. He released the button. He stood at attention in the aisle. In the rear cabin, a man in 28C, early 70s, blue Marine Corps cap, Vietnam veteran embroidered in gold, pulled himself up using the seatback in front of him. His knees shook. He stood. He saluted. A woman in 14A, 34, civilian, no military connection, stood up next. Then the entire row of 14, then 12, then 11, then 9. Within 10 seconds, every passenger on Atlantic Crown Flight 2186 who was physically able to stand was standing. Mr. Hendricks in 1A stood up. His champagne glass was forgotten on his tray. 48 people, standing in silence, standing in the aisle of a Boeing 737 still parked at gate B22. Victor stood up too. He turned slowly and faced the cabin. He lifted the wooden case in both hands, coffee-stained and all. He gave them a small nod, a nod for Elijah. He sat back down. The cabin sat back down. Diana, the second flight attendant, came up the aisle with a soft white cloth and a small bottle of furniture polish she had found in the galley supply drawer. She handed them to Victor without a word. He took them. He began, very slowly, to wipe the coffee off Elijah Brown's flag case. The aircraft pushed back 93 minutes late. By the time they reached cruising altitude over the Carolinas, Sarah Williams's phone had reconnected to in-flight Wi-Fi. She uploaded a 4-minute, 14-second video to her social account at 11:48 a.m. Eastern Time. By 12:30, the video had 200,000 views. By 1:15, it had crossed 1 million. By 2 o'clock, #FlagCase was the top trending hashtag in the United States. By 3:45, Atlantic Crown Airways had issued an emergency statement. By 5:20, before Flight 2186's wheels had even touched the runway at Reagan, Margaret Anderson had been formally suspended without pay, pending termination. Her airline ID had been deactivated. Her parking pass at Hartsfield had been revoked. By 9:15 that evening, a black SUV pulled into her driveway in suburban Marietta. 2 men in dark suits got out. They were not from Atlantic Crown. They were from the Federal Aviation Administration, and the badges on their belts said Office of Investigations. The FAA agents did not arrest Margaret Anderson that night. They came to ask questions. They came to look at her copy of Atlantic Crown's onboard policy manual. They came to read her, calmly, the federal statutes she may have violated in the span of 20 minutes that morning. The first one was 18 U.S. Code Section 700. Knowing desecration of the flag of the United States. The second was 49 U.S. Code Section 46504, interference with crew. The FAA agents pointed out very politely that the statute they had originally assumed applied to Victor now appeared to apply to Margaret instead, for fabricating a non-compliance event and lying to the captain on a federally regulated flight. The third one was Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, in the version applied to common carriers in interstate commerce. Margaret asked for a lawyer. The FAA agents nodded politely. They left their cards on her kitchen counter. They closed her front door very gently behind them. Margaret sat alone at her kitchen table until the sun came up. By the next morning, the story had cracked wide open. A retired Atlantic Crown human resources manager named Carol Whitman, laid off in a corporate restructuring 2 years ago, had been watching Sarah Williams's video on a loop in her living room since the night before. She had cried twice. She had poured a second glass of wine. And then she had walked into her home office, pulled out a banker's box from the back of her closet, and laid 11 internal complaint files on her dining room table. 11 complaints. All filed by passengers of color. All against the same flight attendant. All quietly closed by Atlantic Crown HR over the previous 9 years with no disciplinary action. One was filed by a black federal judge. One was filed by a 14-year-old black girl flying alone to visit her father. One was filed by a Latino family of 5 returning from a funeral in Texas. Carol Whitman wrote one email to one investigative reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a woman named Olivia Bennett. The headline ran the next morning above the fold. Anderson had 11 prior complaints. Atlantic Crown buried every one. Atlantic Crown stock dropped 11% by market close. Within 72 hours, 3 of the 11 prior victims had come forward publicly. The federal judge agreed to do one televised interview. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She simply said on camera, "I was wearing a federal judicial pin on my lapel that day. She still asked me twice to prove the seat was mine." The 14-year-old girl, now 17, asked her mother to speak for her. Her mother spoke for 8 minutes on the Today Show. By the end, the host was wiping her eyes. The story stopped being about one flight attendant. It became about a system that had protected her for 31 years. On day 5, Atlantic Crown CEO Linda Davis stood at a podium in Atlanta and held a press conference that no PR consultant in the country would have advised her to hold. She did not wear a power suit. She wore a plain black dress. She did not use a teleprompter. She did not say, "We deeply regret." She said on live national television, "What happened on Flight 2186 was not a mistake. It was a failure of a person, a failure of a process, a failure of a culture we allowed to live inside this company for too long. I am not here to defend us. I am here to tell you what we are going to do." She announced a $28 million internal civil rights audit, fully independent, with subpoena-like access to every HR file in the company's history. She announced the formation of a new Crew Conduct and Civil Rights Division, to be led by Captain Daniel Brooks. She announced a settlement with Colonel Victor Carter in the amount of $2.3 million, every dollar of which, she added, Colonel Carter had asked be paid directly to a foundation to be created in his name. She announced, finally, that she had spent the previous afternoon in Macon, Georgia, sitting on Colonel Carter's front porch, apologizing in person. She did not smile when the room applauded. She did not look like a woman who had earned applause. 3 weeks later, in the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta, Margaret Anderson sat at a defense table in a beige cardigan. The United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia had indicted her on one count of knowingly desecrating the flag of the United States under 18 U.S. Code Section 700. Her defense attorney argued, with a straight face, that Margaret had not known what was in the case. The prosecutor, a 36-year-old black woman named Charlotte Davis, played Sarah Williams's video on the courtroom screen. The jury watched Victor Carter say, in his calm Georgia drawl, "This case contains the burial flag of Private First Class Elijah Brown, killed in action February 26, 1991, in southern Kuwait. He died saving my life." The jury watched the timestamp. 91 seconds later. 91 seconds. The same jury watched Margaret Anderson drop that case into a trash compactor and slam the lid. They deliberated for 1 hour and 11 minutes. The verdict was guilty. The judge, an elderly white man named Harold Ellington, 3 years from retirement, looked down from the bench before sentencing. "Ms. Anderson, you did not just disrespect a piece of cloth. You disrespected a man who earned the right to carry it home. You disrespected a 19-year-old soldier who died for it. You disrespected every American of every color who has ever served. May the next 500 hours of your life teach you what the last 31 years did not." Sentence: 12 months federal probation, a $15,000 fine, 500 hours of community service at the Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Campus in Decatur, Georgia, a permanent ban from working in any federally regulated transportation industry for the rest of her life. She had lost her job, her pension, her name, her freedom of movement. Exactly as the narrator had told you in the cold open she would. 3 weeks after that, on Memorial Day morning, Colonel Victor Carter stood at a small podium at Arlington National Cemetery. The wooden flag case, sanded, restored, re-oiled by a master craftsman at Atlantic Crown's expense, sat on a small wooden stand beside the podium. In the front row sat General Edward Moore in full dress uniform. Beside him sat Captain Daniel Brooks in his airline uniform. Beside him sat Sarah Williams in a simple black dress. Beside her sat Judge Eleanor Brennan, who had driven up from Atlanta for the occasion. Down at the far end of the cemetery, well out of sight of the ceremony, Margaret Anderson knelt at the base of a marble headstone with a soft cloth and a bottle of water, by court order, cleaning the grave of a soldier she had never met. Victor spoke for 11 minutes. He spoke about Brooklyn, about a 19-year-old boy with a Bible in his chest pocket, about what it means to carry someone home 35 years later. He closed with one sentence. "My brother died holding the same flag that 5 weeks ago a stranger tried to throw away. She failed, because the men beside him do not let go. We never have." A bugler at the edge of the field lifted his instrument. The first long, slow note of taps rolled across the white headstones of Arlington. 6 months passed. Victor Carter went back to his quiet white house outside Macon. The lavender soap still came from the same farmer's market. The photo of 2 young soldiers in desert camouflage still sat on the dresser. But something on the mantel had changed. The wooden flag case had a new home, a glass display alcove built into the wall, paid for by Atlantic Crown. A small brass plaque underneath read, "Private First Class Elijah Brown, United States Army, February 26, 1991. He went first so we could come home." Victor walked past it every morning on his way to make coffee. He still made 2 cups. He still drank one. General Edward Moore retired 11 months after Flight 2186. At his ceremony at the Pentagon, he asked one civilian to speak. The civilian was Colonel Victor Carter. Victor spoke for 6 minutes. about a burning Bradley in 1991, about a young lieutenant whose mother was still alive, about the strange and unfair mathematics of war, that one man dies so two men live. General Moore did not speak after Victor. He just walked to the podium, embraced him, and held him for a very long time. The room was silent. Sarah Williams quit her marketing job and launched a nonprofit called Row 4 Project. Captain Brooks became Atlantic Crown's first VP of Crew Conduct and Civil Rights. Internal complaints of discriminatory treatment dropped 63% in 2 years. Margaret Anderson completed 500 hours of community service at Arlington. She moved to a small town in eastern Tennessee. In her one televised interview 2 years later, she was asked, "Do you understand what you did?" She was quiet for 48 seconds. Then she said, "I understand it now. I did not understand it then. That is the part I have to live with." The wooden flag case still sits behind glass in a house outside Macon. A 19-year-old soldier from Brooklyn still rests under a white stone in Cypress Hills Cemetery. A 4-star general still calls his old captain every Sunday at 6. And somewhere out there, on a flight you have not boarded yet, somebody is being told they don't belong in first class. The question is whether the person 2 rows back has the courage to stand up. You don't need 4 stars on your shoulder to stand up. You need 4 seconds of courage and a phone with a camera. So tell me in the comments, have you ever seen something like this happen and wished you had said something? Did somebody stand up for you when it was your turn to be the one in seat 2A? I want to read every single one of your stories. If this moved you, hit that like button. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Subscribe because every week on this channel, we tell the stories the system tried to throw in the trash. Because folded flags don't belong in trash compactors. And neither do the people who carry them.